The story begins with the signing of the Heligoland-Zanzibar between Britain and Germany in 1890. This treaty effectively drew up spheres of influence between the imperial powers in East Africa. Zanzibar was ceded to British influence, whilst Germany was given control over mainland Tanzania. Under the British influence, Hamad bin Thuwaini was appointed as the sultan who was in favor of the British, and slave trades were abolished. Because of their increasing involvement in the country's government, dissent had risen amongst the native people. 1,000 bodyguards were employed at the sultan's palace in case a resistance were to occur. Hamad bin Thuwaini had ruled the country peacefully for 3 years, until he failed to wake up one morning. Although nobody knows for sure what caused the death of the sultan, it was suspected that he was poisoned. The reason for this is because, immediately after his passing, Hamad's cousin, Khalid bin Barghash, had claimed the position himself without the approval of the British Empire. It suffices to say that the British diplomats aren't pleased with his actions. Basil Cave, the chief diplomat in the area, issued an ultimatum to Khalid to stand down. Khalid ignored the warning and instead barricaded himself inside the palace by deploying 2,800 men armed with rifles and muskets. Khalid's forces were made up of 700 Zanzibari askari soldiers who had sided with Khalid, and the rest of them were civilians. Following Khalid's formation of armed forces in the palace, the British responded by deploying their own forces consisting of a total of 5 warships. Troops were sent to the area to keep the civilians from rioting. Although armed men and warships had already been deployed to the area, Cave was not in power to order for the attack. He sent a telegram to the Foreign Office stating, "Are we authorized, in the event of all attempts at a peaceful solution proving useless, to fire on the palace from the men of war?" Whilst waiting for a reply, Cave continued issuing ultimatums to Khalid, but to no avail. Khalid ignored his commands and instead proclaimed that he was to be the new sultan by 3 in the afternoon. Cave stated that this would constitute an act of rebellion and that Khalid's sultanate would not be recognized by the British government. Around 2 p.m., Sultan Hamad's body was safely buried. Cave had instructed to all foreign consuls that all flags were to remain at half-mast in honor of the late Hamad. The only one that did not was a large red flag flying from Khalid's palace. At exactly 3 p.m., a royal salute from the palace guns proclaimed Khalid's succession. It was only on the following day that Cave had received a reply from the Foreign Office, saying, "You are authorized to adopt whatever measures you may consider necessary and will be supported in your action by Her Majesty's government. Do not, however, attempt to take any action which you are not certain of being able to accomplish successfully." The final ultimatum to Khalid was issued on the 26th of August, requiring him to haul down his flag and leave the palace by 9 in the morning on the 27th. As with all the warnings given, Cave was only met with silence. Since there were no signs of Khalid backing up, Cave prepared for war. He demanded all non-military boats leave the harbor and that all the British women and children to be removed from the area. Consul Mohan noted how eerie the atmosphere was. He said, "The silence which hung over Zanzibar was appalling. Usually, drums were beating or babies cried, but that night there was absolutely not a sound." The day had finally come, and everybody was nervously waiting for the clock to strike at 9. An hour before the chaos had unfolded, a messenger was unexpectedly sent by Khalid requesting a parley. The consul replied that it was already too late and the only escape for him and his men was to follow their orders. Upon receiving this message, Khalid sent his messenger to Cave once more, saying, "We have no intention of hauling down our flag, and we do not believe you would open fire on us." Cave replied, saying that he had no desire to fire upon the palace, but unless you do as you are told, we shall certainly do so. And that was the last time Cave heard from Khalid. At exactly 9 a.m., order was given for the British ships to begin bombarding the palace. Only in the span of 2 minutes, the majority of Khalid's artillery had been destroyed. The palace's wooden structure had started to collapse with all of Khalid's men inside. It is also within this time frame that Khalid is said to have escaped through a back exit of the palace, leaving his servants and fighters to defend the palace alone. By 940, the shelling had ceased, the Sultan's flag pulled down, and the shortest war in history had officially ended after only 38 minutes. Although the duration of the war was short, the number of death tolls were very high. Over 500 of Khalid's men had died due to the lack of protection by the palace's weak structure, and as for the British, only one officer was severely injured, who was later recovered in the hospital. Sultan Hamud was immediately placed as the next Sultan of Zanzibar, and he ruled the country for the next 6 years. The war also marked the end of the Zanzibar Sultanate as a sovereign state, and the start of a period of heavy British influence. As for Khalid, he managed to escape with a small group of loyal followers to the local German consulate. Despite repeated calls from the British for his extradition, he was smuggled out of the country on October 2nd by the German Navy and taken to modern-day Tanzania. It was not until British forces invaded East Africa in 1916 that Khalid was finally captured and subsequently taken to St. Helena for exile. After serving time, he was later allowed to return to East Africa, where he died in 1927. The war destroyed 2 sections of the palace called the Bayt al-Hukm and the Bayt al-Sahil. Only the House of Wonders survived the war, suffering only minor damages. The palace had undergone a lot of changes throughout the centuries, where it was once used as a government office in 1911, and in 1964, it became a school. The palace currently serves as a museum, and it is one of Stone Town's major tourist attractions. In front of the building once stood a lighthouse, which was also destroyed during the war. During reconstruction in 1897, a new clock tower was integrated into the facade of the building. Bayt al-Hukm was not rebuilt. Its location was instead transformed into a garden, increasing the visual dominance of the House of Wonders.